In spite of the chaos and mayhem at the Capitol yesterday, multiple Republican senators still continued with their ridiculous, bogus objections to multiple states' electoral votes, including 6 on Arizona and 8 on Pennsylvania. Prominent defenders of Stop the Steal, Senators Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, both among those who maintained their objections in those 2 states. Will this move put an end to their political ambitions, the exact opposite of what they were hoping?
Well, let's see. Democratic strategist, CEO of Pine Street Strategies, Don Calloway, and co-host of the Realignment podcast, Marshall Kosloff, back to weigh in on this. Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Marshall, let's start with you. Obviously, people can say whatever they want. This was driven by Hawley and Cruz in particular, and I think Rick Scott as well was one of those people who objected to the results by their 2024 political ambitions. And the thesis, the calculus was you can co-opt this energy that we just talked about in our last segment, and you can use it to more of like a legitimate end by talking about Pennsylvania election law and all of that. And those people will then turn out and remember that you stood with them during a presidential primary in 2024. Given in light of everything that happened today, do you think that this will have an impact on those ambitions going forward?
No, because we've talked about this before. They're basically just doing the diet version of Stop the Steal in those issues. Because we're already seeing this on Twitter. We're already seeing people tweeting, and actually now congressmen, including Mo Brooks of Alabama, tweeting that the Capitol break-in was Antifa. So you can think that you're going to get rewarded by voters for just asking questions. But what the reality is that when you indulge something that literally just is not true, when you just ask questions, for many people who are just fundamentally bad faith, it's not going to work out. And this is the most important thing that I want to comment on the political prospects of these people. This isn't just about a picture that was incredibly poorly timed and a very bad look. I think everyone knows what I'm talking about with Senator Hawley in front of the Capitol, sinking political prospects. This is about a display of horrific political instincts that demonstrate you do not have the skill set to navigate the moment. If you did not realize that this was obviously how this was going to end, if you legitimately thought the way to adjudicate a complicated debate about different states and voting procedures with this mix of both toxic, bad faith, and even good faith people who are uninformed, you just are not going to pull this out. And someone like Mo Brooks is always going to go further right than you, and you'll be just stuck in the middle, and it's not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, these are 2 highly educated men, Harvard Law, Yale Law, and they managed to make complete and utter fools of themselves. Don, you're best friends with Josh Hawley, right? That's a joke.
It's a joke.
But you are both from Missouri, and you've encountered him in political context.
I've encountered him. Josh Hawley, until yesterday, was my friend of 15 years. Wow. Josh and I started practicing law together in 2004. We remained in touch over the years, and I've always had tremendous respect for him and just admiration for him as a person. And I am somewhat sad to have to announce to the world, but more importantly to myself, that is over as of yesterday. Blood is on his hands, and I'm proud of his hometown paper, the Kansas City Star, for telling him that in as many words. I think that Marshall is correct. Josh has made an extraordinarily poor political calculation that shows us that he is not he is not mature enough to not only run the country as president, which he aspires to be, but he's not a serious enough person, despite all of his education and despite all of his raw intellectual power. He's not a serious enough person to hold the seat which he currently holds. I think that Josh has made a very lazy, intellectually and politically lazy decision in which he thought that he could co-opt the 75 million Trump voters by simply being a stand-in and showing, hey, I fought for him, now vote for me. That's a silly, extraordinarily silly decision made by him and some extraordinarily inexperienced advisors who I will not name. But he has done irreparable damage to his own personal reputation and his personal character. Remember, it didn't start yesterday. He lied over the weekend by saying Antifa came out and threatened his home in Virginia. By the way, his home is in Virginia. He doesn't live in Missouri anymore, y'all. But he lied about that. That was not true. There was an extraordinarily peaceful.
Don, they came to his house. Look, I don't want to litigate. That's the annoying part.
And read the Constitution. They did not threaten him or.
Yeah, I agree with you. They didn't bang on his door or anything. I'm with you. They came to his house and that's what happened.
Don, can I ask you? I want to go a level deeper with that. Or did I call you Don or did I call you Josh? Anyway, Don, can I go a level deeper with you on that? Because I think it's really instructive. You've known him for 15 years. You would have probably described him as smart, thoughtful, and decent person. Yes. And yet somehow he got caught into, you called it a silly decision. I mean, it's downright dangerous. Playing with matches, in a country that's a powder keg. How did you think it was going to turn out? How does a person that you would think of as a stand-up dude end up in this really despicable place?
Well, in 2010, the Republican Party was taken over by a fringe element known as the Tea Party, which metastasized into what we now see culminating yesterday in QAnon. But we've been seeing these incidents, we have called them isolated, but they have not been isolated over the last 12 years. But that element co-opted the Republican Party, and Republican leadership nationally, locally, has never quite rejected them or openly repudiated them, despite them being representing the worst elements of our society. Why? Because they're willing to vote R instead of D. So they welcome them into the fold, perhaps with their noses held, but they have welcomed them into the fold nonetheless. I think that Josh made a decision when he ran for office in 2016. The first office he ever sought was Attorney General. And when he ran for office, he saw that he had to have that segment of the right or he would not win a primary. And there was no turning back. I hate to sound Shakespearean, but it was a Faustian bargain that he made. And there's no going back from that. And now, in order to serve his ambitions even further, we know that one has to co-opt that element, that fringe element of the Republican Party in order to get to a Republican primary and compete for president post-Trump. Jeb Bush was soundly rejected in 2016.
Yes.
And I think that Josh made a decision that he could be the one to try to appeal to both the country club Republicans, by the way, got him here, right? Which brought him into politics. He can be the one to appeal to them and the Trump votes. And it was a disastrous decision, which I think if it has not ended his political career, it has certainly capped his ambition.
Here would be my pushback, though, Don, which is that from what you're saying is then nobody who's a Republican should run for office. Because it's you can't sniff down or whatever at your own voters. I think you should accommodate them. And Marshall, that's kind of where I would ask you is I actually think it is possible to channel the concerns of Tea Party or whatever, win a Republican primary. And also, as you pointed out, nobody asked for this. Nobody asked Hawley and Cruz to come out, be the faces of the movement. This was a conscious individual choice. I soundly reject the theory that they would have paid a massive political price for, Marco Rubio, as far as I know, did not put out a statement on any of this. He just didn't vote for it. I don't think he's going to pay a price for that. He spoke, right, but I'm saying before that, before last night, he just didn't address this. He also wants to be president, as far as I know. That seems like a fine way to handle it. Or you could be like Tom.
It's like a cowardly way.
Tom Cotton. He stood up, and I'll always respect him for what he said. And he said, no, I'm not doing this. Look, he probably wants to be president too, and it may cost him. So just talk to that about the political, because I think it is still possible. You can still be a Republican. You can still run for office. You can still even win. You don't necessarily have to sell your soul or whatever that. Nobody asked you to take this step.
Yeah, and that's why I'm glad you brought up Senator Cotton's example, who just tremendously impressed me over the past week, because he is the direct reply to folks who argue that you had to do what they did yesterday. Yeah. Tom Cotton is a culture warrior, if there ever was one. He loves doing the own the libs thing on Twitter. Yeah. He wrote the send in the army op-ed during the protest last summer. This is not someone who's a squishy centrist country club Republican. Yet he didn't do it. And in fact, he actually wrote the op-ed before the fact, to your point too, Crystal, that said this was not a good idea. And this is the part where I hate when people say about the arc of, the universe bends towards justice. Sometimes that's a cliche. It's way too reductive, but he's going to be rewarded for that, because the actual thing that he's projecting there is that he's strong. He's strong. He knows what he believes in, and he's not just going to be wishy-washy trying to sort of pull things off in I had a friend last night who's prominent on the right who texted, at some level, playing 80-dimensional chess is just going to screw you up, right? We're beyond the 5D chess. We're at 80 different dimensions of chess. And Tom Cotton's not playing that. And he's going to, and I genuinely believe he's going to be rewarded for that.
Go
ahead, Don.
I want to object to Sagar's characterization of my statement. I didn't by any means say that you have to make the decision that Josh Hawley did. I said that's what he chose to do.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Consequences for him. By no means do you have to be a Republican, and I hope that the Republican Party is able to get a hold of this and moderate it. So I think that decision is long after we're all retired. But I have a hard time celebrating Tom Cotton. Tom Cotton is a moron who has fomented dissent and fomented division in this country from the moment he came into office in 2014. I will never say Tom Cotton's name without saying Cassandra Butts' name. She was an extraordinarily accomplished black woman who was the nominated ambassador to the Bahamas under Barack Obama, and he stopped her simply because she was personal friends with Barack Obama. Not about qualifications or anything like that, and that is a show of who Tom Cotton is. I could run down his list of offenses since, but I certainly don't think that Tom Cotton will be, I disagree with you, Marshall, for the first time today. He will not be rewarded for not doing this today because he has an ample record of silliness over his time in the United States.
Well, it does sound like he'll never get Don Calloway in a Democrat's vote, but, maybe we'll get some Republican votes.
Marshall, I want to ask you one more question about, before this all happened, I really thought, if Donald Trump decided he wanted to run next time, he'd probably be the nominee. And not only that, he probably had a decent shot of winning. This is the first thing, usually there's just nothing matters, right? I think this actually does matter. Mitch McConnell's done with a lot of the normal mainstream establishment Republicans, and all the issues I have with them stipulated are done with this. I think a lot of normal people are done with this. I think there is some final split in the Republican Party over this just absolutely outrageous behavior and the completely shocking images we saw yesterday. But what do you think?
Yeah, let's look at what happened. President Trump betrayed Mike Pence yesterday.
Yeah.
Mike Pence, and seriously, Mike Pence has had his back more than any establishment person the past 4 years and beyond that, and President Trump stabbed him in the back. It's been reported that Mark Short, Vice President Pence's chief of staff, has been banned from the White House grounds. Trump is going around telling people, apparently, that he is glad that Kelly Loeffler and Perdue lost because, quote, they didn't support him enough. It's incredible. This is actually the point where the establishment, but this is also the toxic reality here, which is probably going to unite all of us in frustration. The establishment got their judges. Yeah. The tax cut was passed. There wasn't as big of a stimulus package as they would have wanted. So what's really frustrating here, and this is what's really frustrating for all Americans, definitely, not to once again sound like a cliche, is that they don't need him anymore. They're like, well, look, why would we possibly work with this dude who stabs us in the back when he did what he was supposed to do? And that's actually the real tragedy of the Trump presidency. The tragedy here. Yeah, go on, please, Sagar.
I was going to say, my take is he would win the primary, but a lot of people who might have voted. I was thinking the Mike Pence voter. Mike Pence actually brought in about 20% of the conservative coalition, evangelical Christians and others. I don't think that that's going to fly this time around. And I think that there's, already cost the suburban populations in Atlanta, in Nebraska, in Texas, in California. So many different places where a lot of voters went and voted for Biden. That's just this on steroids this time. And I don't see enough people getting added into the coalition. But apparently we're out of time. Thanks for joining us, guys. It was really thoughtful, great conversation on a terrible day for America. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Coming up, Matt Taibbi is going to continue this conversation when Rising returns.